Hey everyone, welcome back. Welcome to this week's lecture. We're on chapter 9 now. Actually, chapter 10. So we're moving on a little bit of chapter 9, a little bit of chapter 10. The introduction for chapter 10 is for the lab that will be due a week from Monday. So only a couple weeks left. Just a couple of housekeeping things really quickly. A lot of people have asked questions about the final project, so I wanted to give a little bit of information on that. We're kind of getting down to that point, and again, I know it's been a little bit difficult with all of you guys being away with some of the labs, especially the last one. Hope you guys had fun with that Cookie Monster lab. I know it's a little bit difficult without having a bunch of people in the class and groups and group data. So thanks for doing the best that you can with that. It was great, especially those that sent me pictures. I really enjoyed looking at the Cookie Monsters that you guys drew, and hopefully you guys got a little bit of what the simplification process is and how we can utilize making tasks easier in order to facilitate learning the best way that we possibly can. We did that a little bit with trying to identify ways that we can get people through those early learning processes with the rope tying. Giving that simple visual sort of verbal cues with a bunny rabbit in the tree and the hole, with tying the bowline knot. And this is just another way. So with the final project, just a couple of different things with that. Again, you guys should be able to be most of the way through that as far as identifying the learner, identifying the task, classifying the task. And now that we're getting into a point where you're starting to set up a learning environment for the individual that you're working with to do their minute to win it task. Remember that those individuals need to be able to complete the task twice consecutively within the minute guideline, and be able to do that twice on the same video. And that's what you'll email to me at the end of the semester, at the end of finals week. Now that you're making the practice plans for them, though, we've gone through a couple of different lectures, so you should be able to do things like setting goals, setting target goals, performance goals, outcome goals, those types of things. You should be able to comment on those. And now that we're into actually setting up the practice plans themselves, what I really want you guys to do is to think about ways that you can utilize the different parts of part practice, right? So the three different parts of part practice are fractionization, segmentation, and simplification, which simplification you guys did with your lab. So I want you guys to try to implement that with your projects. And just as an example of simplification, when we talk about simplification, one of the earliest ways that we do that with learning a specific sports skill would be like teaching someone how to hit a baseball with a bat, right? We don't start off using a regular size bat and a regular size ball. If you're 3 or 4 years old and you're in the backyard and you're trying to teach your son or daughter or a 3-year-old how to hit, you give them that really big baseball bat with a really big ball in order to ensure early success. And that's simplification. Those are really easy ways. When we teach people how to juggle, we don't give them 3 tennis balls and teach them how to do that right away. We might give them handkerchiefs and have them practice the motions and the timing of throwing those up in the air. Those are ways that we can simplify those skills and simplify those tasks in order to make them easier. So you learn the task, you learn the timing, you learn the ideas, you get the feel for what it is before you slowly start to implement ways that make it easier. Even when we're teaching kids how to play things like basketball, right? We don't start them on a 10-foot rim and try to teach them form. We lower the rim, right? And we give them a smaller basketball, and we teach them form and function and those types of things first. That's simplification. So simplification is a really easy one that you guys should be able to implement with your learning plans, with your practice plan for your minute to win it skill. That could look like any of a number of different things with whatever your particular task is. Think of ways that you can simplify your task in order to make the learning process much easier. Fractionization is when you only practice part of it, right? So a lot of these skills will lend itself to fractionization, where you may practice the skills independently of themselves, and then you put them together. So if it's a complicated skill, you might have them practice one part of it. The example that was in the PowerPoint is trying to teach someone a stroke in swimming. Let's say the breaststroke. The breaststroke was really difficult, and fractionization would say, well, it's really hard to put all of those things together at once. So let's teach them the upper body part with the arms first, right? So you got the motion with the arms. So you might put floating devices on their legs or their waist to keep them above water, and then they're just practicing the upper body portion of that stroke. And then once they get that down, then you might put them on a kickboard and then teach them the frog kick of that stroke. And then once they've got both of those down and they're pretty proficient at it, then you combine the two skills and have them work on those together. And the last one is segmentation, and segmentation is one that you should all be able to do with yours. That's when you take a skill, and usually these are skills that are when we look at and we're defining discrete, serial, or continuous, usually our serial skills are ones that have several steps to them. Sort of like tying your shoe, right? Tying your shoe is a serial skill, and you have to practice that first knot before you can move on to making the bunny ears. So segmentation is where you take one portion of it and you learn the first portion of it. Once you have that down, then you add the next. So a pole vaulter isn't going to take a pole and get inverted and go over the bar the first time they do it. They may just practice holding the pole and doing their run-ups, and then after they get that down and they're comfortable running with a pole, then they might actually just do their run down the runway and practice and work on planting the pole in the whatever it's called, wherever you plant the pole for the pole vault. And once they have that down, then they may just work on getting to that point and then bending the pole. They may not get inverted, but they may just start to go up, and they continue to build and build and build and build. So it's pretty simple when we look at using fractionization, segmentation, and simplification. Those are all things that you can use for your minute to win it skills. So take a look at your skills, identify ways that you can either do fractionization. So you can do fractionization, you can do segmentation, or you can do simplification with your minute to win it skill. And just start with that, right? So think of ways that you can alter those skills in order to make the early stages of learning much easier for your partner. So remember with the final project, I'm not looking for big essay-ish type answers. You can take the sheet that I gave you guys for your final project and on those bullet points, just write on those, just edit right into that document ways that you're doing those, right? So define those terms, define those aspects of the project right in that document. And remember, you may not use all of those, right? Your skill or your task may not lend itself to fractionization, or it may not lend itself to all of the different types of goal setting that you have. So whatever you use or whatever you're utilizing for your project, that's what you'll comment on. You won't use all of them. You might, if you want to go above and beyond and try to find ways that you can utilize all the different aspects and the terms that we're using this semester, that's great. I'd love to read it. Just know that only the ones that are relevant to your particular task are what you're going to be using, right? So we've talked about supplementing the learning experience, and now we're going to talk about the actual learning environment itself. So this week we're talking about what's called blocked versus random practice and constant versus varied practice. And those are the ways that we actually set up practice plans in order to utilize different means of practicing in order to have people do repetitions in a functional and meaningful manner based on what stage of learning that they're in. So this particular lab is going to look at blocked versus random practice. Now, blocked versus random practice are practice schemes that look at either doing the same task over and over and over again. So you're repeating the same task before you move on. So a great example of a blocked practice is if you're out on the tennis court and you're working on a practice plan, you may just sit and do forehands and work on forehands, and your instructor may be on the other side of the net and they may just hit tennis balls to your forehand, and you're just working on forehands over and over and over again. And you're doing repetitions at that particular skill over and over and over again, right? And after you've done a certain number of reps, then you move and your instructor will hit you backhands, and then you're working on backhands, and you continue to repeat that over and over and over again. And then once you have that down, then you may go to overhand smashes, and then you're working on those. So a blocked practice scheme is just one where you're working on the same skill over and over and over again before you move on to the next one, right? It ensures early success. It makes sure that those motor programs are fresh in your mind. You're getting constant feedback about what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and you're utilizing it on the next attempt that has the same demands as the one that you did before. A random practice scheme is usually utilized later on in the learning process, where the mover doesn't necessarily know what's coming next. So your instructor on the other side of the net may hit you a forehand and then a backhand and then another forehand and an overhand smash and have you moving and doing different types of strokes at different times, but you don't know what's coming next. And that does a great job of making sure that you're able to take the information from the environment and utilize that for every attempt. So each time you have to come up with a new plan, develop a scheme that's going to be successful with that, and you're utilizing that information processing system to make sure that you're identifying the stimulus correctly, you're processing the stimulus correctly, right? And then you're programming the stimulus, you're programming the right program in order to be successful with that particular task. And that's what this lab is meant to do. Now, again, because we're not in a class setting and we're not going to be doing multiple labs or multiple days with this, when you get this lab and you perform this lab with whoever you're working with, you can either choose constant versus random practice. And based on what you selected, the portion of the lab that you'll do will be dictated by either a constant versus random or blocked versus random practice scheme. And you can see on the lab that the purpose of this task is to take the 3 circles, and with this one you want to complete the task, and all you're doing is tapping between the 3 circles, right? So there's a circle on the bottom, on the left, on the top, on the right, and all you're doing is that when your partner says go, you're going to be moving left, top, right in the amount of time that is on the sheet. So you want to be able to complete that in either 1.5 seconds, 2.5 seconds, or 3.5 seconds. In a blocked practice scheme, you're going to be doing all of the 1.5 second tasks at the exact same time consecutively before you move on to the 2.5 seconds. You'll do all your 2.5 second trials before you move on to the 3.5 seconds. The random group will be taking the exact same movements, 1.5 seconds, 2.5 seconds, or 3.5 seconds, and doing those in a random nature. So you may do 1.5 seconds, then 3.5 seconds, and then 1.5 and 2.5, and each one of your blocks of 18 trials will be random in nature. So the purpose of this is to make a determination or try to identify which one of these practice schemes works better, right? Because what we're trying to decide is what works better in practice versus what works better in order to prepare that individual for the learning environment, right? So the big debate is, do we want to be better practicers, right? People that are learning a skill for the first time, we want to make sure that their practice is as successful as we can possibly make it, versus most of the time in a real world, when we talk about Henry specificity of learning, we want our practice schemes to line up with the target context as much as we possibly can. So we want to practice like we're going to play, right? So if we're taking batting practice, a block practice schemes might mean you're just getting fastball. Your coach is throwing you fastball after fastball after fastball, which is great, but that's not the way that it's going to be in a game. So if you're practicing baseball in a random nature, your coach might throw you a fastball, then a changeup, then a curveball, then a changeup, and a fastball, more like a real-life game situation. So every pitch that's thrown, you have to utilize all 3 portions of that information processing system in order to be successful. That's what this lab is intended to do, to give you a feel of that blocked versus random practice scheme. And then ultimately what we want to see is that we want to see which one is better for practice. We would think that if we're hypothesizing about this, that blocked practice scheme that's doing all 18 trials of their 1.5 seconds, then their 2.5 seconds, then their 3.5 seconds, their results should be better at practice. Right? But the random group that is always constantly shifting or changing what their focus is, they should do better during the retention test. And you guys will see that both groups will do their practice and then move on to their retention. And the retention is more like a real life situation where it's random in nature. You don't know what time you're going to have next. You're not going to get feedback. You're just going to go through your trials during your retention test, and then you'll take a look at both partners, look and see who performed better in practice, who performed better during the retention test, and it should give you an idea. Now, a lot of the different theories that are based on blocked versus random practice, constant versus varied, they're in your PowerPoint. So I put all of those in there. We'll talk about a little bit more of those a little bit later on in the week, but I want you to think about those theories, things like action plan reconstruction and spacing and the forgetting hypothesis, about which one are you utilizing when you're doing these different practice schemes. So have fun with this lab. This is a good one. Be competitive with it. Try to do the best that you possibly can to utilize these blocked versus random practice schemes when you're going through the lab. Have a great week, you guys. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more information about the final project and gets you guys rolling on the labs for this particular week. Same way as always, I didn't put a Dropbox in Moodle for these. I think you guys are doing a great job of it's just easier to take pictures of those, what you guys are doing on your phone, and then emailing me those. So that's great. Keep up the good work, you guys. Again, get your work turned in. That's what I'm looking for. I want you guys to put the effort in. I want you guys to learn and get a feel for this in the environment that we're in. I'm more interested that you guys are going through the learning process and seeing these different theories with the labs that we're doing, to set you guys up for the most success that we possibly can in the future. Take care, you guys. Be safe. Enjoy your time away. Hopefully we know more soon about what everything's going to look like moving forward. Take care. Bye.